and we get to meet new people as well. As Ansgar said, I'm going to focus on really what the theme is of the conference for the next couple of days. Introduce the theme and talk a little bit about how we see things happening within Gemalto. But before I get started, I just want to get to know, who we have here, who the attendees are. So, first of all, who here has attended Licensing Live in the past? A show of hands, those have attended? Okay, so that those who have not been at Licensing Live? All right, a lot of newcomers this year. All right, welcome. We're going to be talking about things from two different aspects. One is if you're a pure software company, so you sell software, whether on-premise, cloud, or a mixture. And the other is if you're an intelligent device vendor. So that means a vendor selling hardware that has a combination of software. So how many people here are what I would call the software vendors, on-premise, cloud, or a combination? Okay. And intelligent device vendors? Okay, so it seems like a pretty kind of even split within the crowd. And then lastly, even for either one of those categories, software or intelligent device, how many of you are already offering a cloud service, SaaS, or something like that? Okay, so it looks about a third of the room. Great. So for those of you who were here last year, you might remember I started off with a story. My 16-year-old son took a football, broke a table. I think Warren got a football out of it. So this year I'm going to talk about my 8-year-old. So my 8-year-old, my youngest, he is in this motive, he's obsessed with Star Wars. Okay, so as 8-year-old boys tend to do, they get obsessed with different things, whether it's dinosaurs, space. This Star Wars obsession has been going on for months. It's the toys, it's the movies, it's the Lego. I think it has to do with the upcoming Star Wars movie he's very excited about. He's already marked it on all our calendars. We have a family movie night for the day it comes out. And this is actually a picture of him. Whoops. A picture of him on his way to school. Literally. And thankfully, he agreed to remove the mask. This is Darth Maul, if you don't recognize the character. And I find that he walks around the house, thinking that he is going to, if he practices, then he will be able to use the Force. Right? So he walks around trying to move objects. At the dinner table just last week, he's sitting there, and he's going like this to the iced tea, and he's getting really frustrated because it's not moving. We finally handed it to him, and that was not what he was looking for. So understandably, this is his favorite commercial. I don't know if you saw this. This came out a few years ago. I think it was Super Bowl. Okay, so why am I telling you all this? You're not getting a car, Warren. It's not, we're not doing any giveaways. But basically what my son doesn't realize is that, right, over the last few weeks, Volkswagen has gone over to the dark side, right? It's like the evil empire. It's kind of crazy what's been happening over there, right? They're now blaming it on these rogue software engineers, 3 engineers that somehow, installed the software that is tricking the emission testing systems to make it look like they're in compliance, but they're actually not in compliance. And it's not just Volkswagen, right? Recently, a couple months ago, there was some people who hacked into Jeep and were able to control the car remotely. Jeep had to do a recall. I think it was 1.4 million vehicles because they didn't have a way to update the software, right? And the entire auto industry is kind of going through this transition. Because what's happening in the auto industry is what's happening where we're seeing across industries, right? Is that these companies are becoming software companies. But they don't yet know really how to act like software companies, right? They're not necessarily thinking like software companies. They don't know how to monetize their software, how to manage their software, right? The Jeep example, if they had a mechanism for being able to do remote updates, then that would have saved them a lot of time, headache, bad PR, et cetera. And it's not just in the auto industry we're seeing it. This is happening across the business. So as I spoke about at the beginning, right, we see there's pure software companies, right, those that are selling software, whether it's on-premise, in the cloud, or a combination, and intelligent device vendors, right, so those that are selling systems that have hardware and software, where software is a significant component of what it is that they're offering. And what's affecting them is that software is everywhere, and connectivity is everywhere. And this is driving major change or transformation, as we're going to be talking about today, in these industries. Pure software companies, they're changing. They're becoming recurring businesses, right? They have, connected businesses. It's a recurring models. They have to be able to deal with what that means and act more in a service-centric type of a way. What we're finding when we're meeting and talking to intelligent device vendors, customers, partners, et cetera, the Internet of Things is coming up in every single conversation. Whether they're doing it today, whether they have plans of it, whether they're seeing their competitors do it, it's coming up all the time. And what's driving this is that software is everywhere and there's connectivity everywhere. And so what I want to do is I just want to touch on, kind of take you down each of these paths separately, and then I'll bring it back together. So I'll talk first about, as the pure software companies, and the change that they're going through, and what that means from a monetization aspect, and what we see some of the things that they should be thinking about. And then I'll do the same on the device vendors, the intelligent device vendors as well. So from the pure software companies, what we're seeing is, there are those that are thinking still on-premise. There are those that are talking about cloud. And what we think the ideal situation is those that are looking at how do they bridge on-premise and cloud, right? It's how do they make that connection? How do they support and get the best of both worlds? So from a monetization aspect, right, there are a number of things that we think that you can leverage if you're looking at, okay, how do I leverage the advantages of both on-premise as well as the cloud connectivity? So for example, in cloud connectivity enables real-time connectivity to your customers. You can really get a real-time sense and real-time updates of the licensing and how all the monetization is working. User-centric, right? With having cloud-based licensing, it is now basically the license goes with the user instead of the machine. It's not locking the user to the machine. The user can use it on all different types of machines that they're looking at. Data-driven. Utilizing cloud-connected, cloud-enabled licensing, you can see what my customer is using, whether I want to do that for subscription model, for usage-based models, or if I want to be able to utilize it for business intelligence purposes. Flexible business models, right? I want to be able to offer the traditional on-premise models by having the on-premise capabilities, but at the same time, I also want to be able to leverage the newer, more cloud-like business models, whether it's subscription, whether it's pay-per-use or whatnot. I want to do this all within a unified management system, right? I want a single licensing platform or single monetization platform that I can also manage all the back office processes in a unified environment. And I also want to connected to that, provide my customer an improved and a very smooth experience. Because one of the things that we find, right, and I think we see this with everyday devices and technologies that we use, is that the more features and functionality you put in, oftentimes what ends up happening is the trade-off is that the user experience declines. And so you have to make sure to find the right balance between these. And at the same time, you also want to leverage a lot of the things that come from more traditional, I would call traditional on-premise, which is the security aspects, right? I want to make sure that, I mentioned some of the examples earlier of security-related. We're finding more security threats, both in software or and intelligent devices with the connectivity. You want to make sure your licensing is enforced securely, and you want to make sure to protect your IP, because as software is being delivered and is being consumed in all different ways, there are more and more risks that are happening that your IP is going to get stolen and reworked. And finally, you want to make sure you have the deployment flexibility. And I think this is the true advantage of having this, the kind of single view of having to bridge the on-premise and the cloud. Because there are customers of yours that might say, that's nice you're offering a cloud solution, but I have a network, what we call internally an isolated network, that I'm not going to be allowing internet access, right? It might be a bank, might be government, defense, or whatever it might be. On the flip side, you might have a customer that's saying, oh, all we do is consume through cloud. We don't want anything else. And then you have kind of this whole balance in between of different types of customers. And so it's important to be able to have this unified type of a solution that you can have the different flexibility of deployment models so that you're not hampering your customers in the way that they're going to be using your solutions or the way you're deploying them as well. So from a pure software company perspective, I think it's really important to think through these things and look at them and as you're planning your monetization strategies to make sure that you have the right setup in place for both the traditional on-premise and the cloud, and then wherever you might fit kind of in between. From an IoT perspective, there are some similarities from an IoT perspective. But the way we kind of, when we talk to companies and we talk to the market about IoT, well, we really look at it as on 3 different levels. Because for us, it's IoT, which is very much connected to the devices themselves, at the first level. Whether it's IoT or you're looking at it from a pure embedded perspective. But there's a lot of monetization aspects that need to be considered when you're looking at the device as a standalone device, right? This example just shows a 3D printer. It could be anything. It could be networking gear, medical devices, a car, whatever it might be. one example from looking at it from a device is, okay, do I want to be able to enable different packages that I'm going to sell to my customers, use the same hardware, and do feature-based licensing, right? So that's more traditional standard licensing on the devices. Customer A might get one feature set, and customer B might get a second feature set. At the same time, though, when I'm selling my systems, and this is becoming even ever so more critical as the connectivity of these devices is coming into play, is I need to make sure that there's integrity of the device. Meaning my customer is going to use the device the way that I am planning for them to use it. I want to make sure there's data integrity. I want to make sure that there's application integrity, device integrity. And then the third part is around the security, is making sure that my IP is protected. Again, it's critical for me. I've investing a lot. I'm becoming more like a software vendor than a hardware vendor. Many customers and companies that we work with, they call themselves hardware vendors, but 80% of their R&D are actually software people. And so their IP for software is becoming more important, but the hardware is becoming commoditized, and so they need to be careful that they're really protecting that IP. And so that's if you think about it from an isolated device standpoint, right? At the next level, though, there's also the life cycle of that device. I might have sold 1, 10, hundreds, thousands of those devices, and how do I make sure that I can now manage those devices that are in the field from a licensing, from a monetization aspect? Again, thinking back to the Jeep example, if they would have had a way to securely update the software, know which versions, and know who's entitled to which type of software, they wouldn't have had to do the recall. There are the aspects of the entitlements, right? How do I know who's activated which entitlements and who's entitled to what on all of these different devices and all the software that's running on these devices? And it all needs to be done in a secure method in order to ensure that my business and ensure my customers' business that this is being done with the tightest security around it. And the third aspect, and I think this is very, very relevant with the IoT, is the ecosystem. Right? The devices, especially as you start to have the connectivity and the software that's being driven there, it's much easier now to open up your devices that you're selling or open up really your solutions to third parties to be able to basically leverage your solutions as a platform. Right? So I want to be able to enable third parties to plug in, if you might think about it that way, to plug in to my ecosystem and my ecosystem of customers and partners and really leverage that. Well, that's great, and I think it's a great way to go, but at the same time you need to consider, though, how do I monetize that? How do I monetize that ecosystem? How do I ensure that people that are actually plugging into that ecosystem are authorized to do so? Right? How do I leverage all of this, all the footprint that I have with my customers and the partnerships in order to make sure that I am really able to leverage all the aspects of this? So from the device itself, the next level of the life cycle of managing devices and the life cycle of the software and the updates and the licensing, and then finally the ecosystem. So the way we approach and the way we view it, whether you're a pure software company or an intelligent device vendor, and going through this transformation from, it might be on-premise to cloud, it might be a device to IoT, software is becoming more important. It's really a transition to this platform approach for software monetization, where we look at at the top you can see those kind of 4 main use cases of types of deployment type, right? I might be a software company selling on-premise, I might be selling it for cloud deployments, might be selling it for mobile, maybe all 3. As a device vendor, I might also add the device component there. And there are core capabilities of this monetization platform, which include licensing, right? I mentioned it earlier with like the feature-based type of licensing, different licensing models, making sure that that licensing is enforceable. The entitlement management of those licenses and the licensing lifecycle and the whole back office aspects of it. The usage metering, which is key not just to be able to offer a usage-based business model, but I also want to get the intelligence out there that now that I have this connectivity in place, right? I want to understand, if I'm a product manager, how are my customers using my products? Are they using my products? Which functionality they're using? As a salesperson, is my customer actively using a trial or not? Is this the right time to try to convert them to a paid customer? And then finally, the security aspects, which I touched on earlier, both from a licensing and a licensing enforcement perspective, as well as IP protection. And so that's what we look at as kind of the core foundational aspects of a platform. But there's another component coming into it as well, or how my platform is deployed. One is the back office systems. If I'm a software company or an intelligent device vendor, it needs to link to my CRM systems, my ERP systems, to make it really, truly part of my business processes. And the other is this expanded ecosystem, right? We have, and Ansgar mentioned the partner pavilion outside, right? We have many deployments where the customers ask for, okay, we have the core monetization platform. We also need billing in addition to that. Customer portal to enable access to the end customers to really manage their licensing. We've got a great demo outside for that if you haven't seen that yet. The whole ESD aspect, how to actually deliver my software. Again, whether I'm a pure software company, deliver the software, the licensing, et cetera, pure software company or intelligent device vendor. There's IoT platforms, there's embedded platforms, and there are many, many, many more. And what we're seeing is, as the software monetization requirements are changing because the end customers are consuming software differently, we need to take this really ecosystem type of approach beyond kind of the core capabilities that we're providing ourselves. And all this is wrapped in a layer of services. So services could be everything from how do I help plan my licensing deployments and my processes around it, my business models, how do I implement my licensing project, to a services layer to help manage this licensing platform. Right? It's a cloud-delivered licensing platform, or it can be an on-premise delivered licensing platform. And so we put this all together. It's truly this platform approach that we at Gemalto have been driving towards for several years now. We have the capabilities in place, but we think in general this is the approach, the right approach to looking at when you're planning a monetization platform for your own use, whether you're a software company or intelligent device vendor. So just to talk about the theme today. So today's theme is business transformation, monetization strategies for software and IoT. So back a few months ago when we started planning the conference, we were thinking about, okay, what should we really focus on for the next couple of days? And we started looking at some of the things that our customers and our partners are going through, and really these 7, I would say, key components or key categories of areas that we wanted to address in the next couple of days. And it all tied to this transformation, right? The transformation that I touched on in the beginning. If you're a software company moving to this recurring type of a business model, or if you're a device vendor moving to the embedded and IoT space. So it starts from in no particular order, but operational execution, meaning first of all from the execution of my actual licensing project, right? What is my best approach in terms of planning it and implementing it? But also how do I actually manage my ongoing licensing? What's the best operational best practices around that? Automation. When I roll this out, how do I automate it as much as possible? How do I automate processes, things like quote to cash and others? The customer experience that I mentioned earlier, it's critical that we get the customer experience right. And there needs to be more of a focus in general, I think, but particularly in software monetization around improving that customer experience. The business models, like I mentioned, you might still be offering on traditional models, transitioning to cloud, transitioning to subscription, transitioning to usage-based models. Security aspects, I mentioned a couple of times already how the security is becoming ever more important. And we're going to have different sessions both on specifically around security needs within the IoT and general security, whether you're a software company or a device vendor. The whole data-driven piece, which I think is, it's still a lot of companies moving in that transition. So trying to figure out, what do we do with this data that we can collect? How do we collect the data? What can we actually do with it to make it actionable? And finally, we talk about this a lot when we meet with our customers, is how do you make sure that it's future-proof? Because this transformation that we're going to be talking about these next couple of days, right, it's what we see today. But things are changing. And to just show a quote from, I think, one of the most quotable characters ever, right? Always in motion is the future, right? Everything is changing, so you need to make sure that it's future-proofed. And we're hoping that over the next couple of days, you're going to really take advantage and get the benefits of the industry experts, of the case studies, of the Gemalto experts, of our partners, and even just meeting with your peers within the industry, right? Other people that are dealing with monetization and licensing, and hopefully you'll really get the benefits to start thinking along those lines of those 7 different categories. Thank you very much.